Julette's trembling fingers gripped the Mont Blanc pen as she signed the termination papers, $1 million non-disclosure agreement masking the life-altering secret growing inside her. She vanished into thin air. 6 years later, one accidental collision in a Boston lobby brought the ruthless head of the Moretti syndicate face to face with his spitting image. The air inside the penthouse office at One World Trade Center was thick enough to suffocate, despite the state-of-the-art ventilation humming quietly in the background. Julette Carmichael sat on the edge of a custom-tufted leather chair, her posture rigidly perfect, her heart shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. Across the expansive mahogany desk stood Storm Moretti. He was a man carved from marble and violence, draped in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that cost more than most people's vehicles. As the head of Moretti Enterprises, a legitimate global logistics conglomerate that served as a brilliant, impenetrable front for the most powerful Cosa Nostra syndicate on the East Coast, Storm commanded rooms with a terrifying, quiet authority. For 2 years, Julette had been his executive assistant. For the last 11 months, she had been his secret, consuming obsession. But today, the warmth in his stormy gray eyes was completely extinguished. "The terms are generous, Miss Carmichael," Arthur Pendleton, the syndicate's chief legal counsel, said smoothly. The lawyer sat adjacent to her, sliding a thick stack of ivory, watermarked papers across the desk. $5 million transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans, completely tax-free, full premium healthcare coverage for the next decade. In exchange, you sign the non-disclosure agreement. You forfeit your position here, and you relocate outside of New York State, permanently. Julette stared at the bold font of the NDA. Her stomach churned violently, a symptom she could no longer attribute solely to her anxiety. Deep inside her designer tote bag, hidden beneath her leather planner, was a folded sonogram from Mount Sinai Hospital. It was dated that very morning. 8 weeks. She was 8 weeks pregnant. Is this really necessary, Storm? Julette's voice was a fragile whisper, betraying the stoic mask she was desperately trying to maintain. She looked past the lawyer, directly at the man she loved. Storm remained, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the torrential rain battering the Manhattan skyline. He didn't flinch. He didn't turn around. He held a crystal tumbler of Macallan 25, his knuckles white from his iron grip on the glass. "It is," Storm said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone, completely stripped of emotion. "The commission has finalized the agreement. I am to marry Camilla Russo next month. The merger between the Moretti and Russo families requires a clean slate. No loose ends. No liabilities. Liabilities." The word struck Julette across the face, harder than a physical blow. That was all she was to him now. A risk. A vulnerability. She knew the rules of his world. She had seen the shadows behind his corporate deals, the men with broken noses and tailored suits who visited his office after hours. She knew that a mafia boss could not have a mistress while trying to forge a fragile peace treaty with a rival Brooklyn bloodline. But what Storm didn't know, what she had been entirely prepared to tell him before she walked into this ambush of a meeting, was that she was carrying his heir. Julette looked down at her hands. If she told him about the pregnancy now, what would happen? Storm was a man defined by duty, power, and possession. He would never let his flesh and blood walk away. He would force her to stay. She would be locked away in a gilded cage in Long Island, hidden from the world, while her child grew up surrounded by bodyguards, blood money, and the constant, looming threat of assassination. Her child would become a pawn in the very mob war Storm was trying to prevent. She couldn't do that to her baby. She wouldn't. "I don't want your money," Julette said, her voice steadying as maternal instinct replaced her devastation. "Take the money, Julette," Storm commanded, his tone hardening. He finally turned to face her. The sheer exhaustion on his face was startling. Dark circles shadowed his piercing gray eyes, and the harsh line of his jaw betrayed a profound tension. "Take it, sign the paper, and leave. You'll have a new life. A safe one." He thought he was protecting her. In his twisted, syndicate-hardened mind, severing ties with a massive payout was the ultimate act of mercy. He was keeping her out of the crossfire of his incoming marriage to a sociopathic mob princess. Juliette reached for the heavy Mont Blanc pen resting beside the documents. Her fingers were numb. She uncapped it, the gold mechanism clicking loudly in the dead silence of the office. "I am resigning," Juliette said, her eyes locked onto the signature line. "And I am signing your non-disclosure agreement, Storm. But I am refusing the $5 million. Keep your severance. I want nothing tying me to this company, or to you, ever again." Arthur Pendleton frowned, opening his mouth to argue, but Storm raised a single commanding hand, silencing the lawyer instantly. Storm stared at Juliette, a flicker of genuine shock and perhaps profound regret passing through his cold facade. With 3 swift strokes, Juliette Carmichael signed her name. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She reached to her left wrist and unclasped the diamond-encrusted Cartier watch Storm had given her for her birthday. She placed it delicately on top of the legal papers, alongside her platinum keycard to the building. "Congratulations on your engagement, Mr. Moretti," she whispered. She turned and walked out of the double oak doors, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She didn't look back. By midnight, Juliette had packed the entirety of her small apartment in Astoria, Queens. She boarded a 3:00 a.m. Amtrak Acela train, heading north. As the city skyline faded into the blackness of the night, Juliette rested a protective hand over her flat stomach, allowing the tears she had held back all day to finally fall. 6 years later, Boston, Massachusetts. The grand lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel, 1 Dalton Street, was a symphony of opulent chaos. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over the imported Italian marble and the elite clientele mingling in the lounge. Juliette Carmichael, now 31, stood near the concierge desk, frantically scrolling through an email on her tablet. She looked undeniably successful. Dressed in a tailored emerald green crepe suit, her auburn hair pulled back into a sleek chignon, she looked the part of the highly sought-after luxury real estate stager she had become. Fleeing New York had forced her into survival mode, and she had thrived. She had built her own boutique staging and design firm from the ground up, catering to Boston's old money and new tech billionaires. But her greatest achievement wasn't her business. It was sitting on a velvet ottoman 3 feet away, deeply engrossed in a die-cast model Aston Martin. Leo. He was 5.5 years old, and he was a terrifyingly exact carbon copy of the man Juliette had spent 6 years trying to forget. Leo had the same thick, dark hair that refused to be tamed, the same straight, aristocratic nose, and most painfully, those exact, intense, stormy gray eyes. He was a quiet, fiercely intelligent child, possessing a brooding stoicism that made other mothers at his private preschool nervous. "Mommy," Leo said, his voice surprisingly deep for a child his age, "the wheel is sticking." "I know, baby. Just give me 1 second, Juliette muttered, her eyes glued to the screen. Her babysitter had called in sick with strep throat at the last possible minute, leaving Juliette no choice but to bring Leo along to the most important walkthrough of her career. A massive New York development conglomerate, Vanguard Holdings had just purchased the top 3 penthouse floors of the Dalton for a staggering $80 million. They had hired Juliette's firm to furnish and stage the properties for international buyers. It was a career-making contract. She was waiting for the mysterious CEO of Vanguard to arrive for their initial handshake and design presentation. "Mommy," it rolled, Leo announced. Juliette looked up, distracted. "What rolled, Leo?" "The car." Juliette Seahead, lowering her tablet. "Okay, stay right here. Let me get it." She turned, her eyes scanning the vast polished floor. The silver toy Aston Martin had rolled quite a distance, coming to a halt near the entrance of the hotel's exclusive private dining room. As Juliet took a step toward it, the heavy oak doors of the dining room swung open. A phalanx of men in dark, expensive suits stepped out. The air in the lobby seemed to immediately drop 10 degrees. The casual chatter of the hotel guests hushed instinctively, sensing the sudden shift in the room's power dynamic. Juliet froze, her breath hitched in her throat, trapped behind a sudden, suffocating wall of panic. Walking at the center of the detail, looking older, broader, and infinitely more dangerous than he had 6 years ago, was Storm Moretti. He was speaking in a low, sharp tone to Matteo Vieri, his massive, heavily scarred underboss. Storm's presence was a physical force. The years had hardened him. The lines around his mouth were deeper, his jaw set with a permanent, ruthless tension. Vanguard Holdings. It wasn't a corporate developer, it was a shell company. Moretti Enterprises was expanding its territory into Boston. Juliet's mind screamed at her to run, to grab Leo and disappear out the revolving glass doors, but her legs were rooted to the marble floor. Suddenly, a small figure darted past her. "My car!" Leo chirped, breaking his usual stoic demeanor to chase after his prized possession. "Leo, no!" Juliet gasped, lunging forward. But she was in heels, and the boy was fast. Leo skidded to a halt right at the feet of the advancing men. The toy car had rested directly against the toe of a highly polished black Oxford shoe. Matteo Vieri immediately stepped forward, his hand reflexively sliding beneath his suit jacket toward his holster, a deeply ingrained paranoia kicking in even at the sight of a child. But Storm threw an arm out, stopping his underboss instantly. Storm looked down, Leo looked up. The world seemed to stop spinning. The ambient noise of the luxurious lobby completely faded away. Storm Moretti stared down at the small boy standing bravely in front of him. For a second, the Mafia Boss looked profoundly confused. He blinked, his piercing gray eyes scanning the boy's face. The dark hair, the slope of the jaw, the intense, unblinking gray eyes staring back at him with absolute lack of fear. It was like looking into a mirror, reflecting 30 years into the past. It was like looking at a ghost of his own father. A visceral electric shock ripped through Storm's entire body. The air was sucked from his lungs. "That's my Aston Martin," Leo said clearly, pointing a small finger at the floor. "You're stepping on it." Storm didn't move. He couldn't. His heart, long dormant and buried under years of blood and syndicate warfare, hammered violently against his ribs. Slowly, moving as if in a trance, the ruthless head of the Moretti family crouched down to the floor, bringing himself to eye level with the 5-year-old boy. He picked up the silver toy car, his large, scarred hands that had ordered the executions of rival bosses, trembled imperceptibly as he handed it back to the child. "Here," Storm breathed out, his voice hoarse. "What is your name?" Before Leo could answer, a frantic, terrified voice sliced through the heavy air. "Leo!" Storm's head snapped up. Standing 10 feet away, her face pale as a sheet of ice, her chest heaving with sheer terror, was Juliet. Storm slowly stood up to his full height of 6'3", his eyes locked onto hers. The shock on his face rapidly morphed into something else entirely, as his brilliant, analytical mind did the brutal math 6 years since she vanished. A boy who looked to be about 5, possessing the undeniable, unmistakable bloodline features of the Moretti family, a terrifying, possessive fury ignited in his gaze. He had found her, and in the same breath, he realized what she had stolen from him. Tension suffocated the grand lobby of the Dalton. Matteo Vieri, recognizing the explosive volatility of the situation, subtly signaled the rest of the security detail. 4 broad-shouldered men in tailored suits seamlessly shifted, forming an impenetrable, discreet barricade around their boss, shielding the intensely private standoff from the prying eyes of the Boston elite. Juliet snatched Leo's small hand, her maternal instincts roaring into overdrive. "We are leaving," she declared, her voice trembling but laced with a defiant steel she didn't know she possessed. "You are not taking another step, Juliet," Storm countered. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the undeniable, terrifying weight of absolute authority. He looked from her pale face down to the Vanguard Holdings dossier clutched tightly against her chest. His sharp, analytical mind connected the dots with devastating speed. "Vanguard, you are the design contractor my proxy hired." It was a cosmic, cruel twist of fate, a purely accidental collision in a hotel lobby that had just unearthed a buried empire of lies. He hadn't tracked her down. The universe had simply thrown her directly back into his crosshairs. "Storm, please," Juliet pleaded, her professional composure fracturing. "You have your life in New York. I have mine here. Let us walk away." Storm's jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered beneath his skin. His storm-gray eyes dropped back to Leo, who was staring up at the giant of a man with unapologetic curiosity. Storm's chest rose and fell heavily. The phantom grief of 5 missed years' first steps, first words, scraped knees slammed into him, swiftly followed by an all-consuming, possessive rage. "Upstairs," Storm commanded, turning his intense gaze back to her. He gestured toward the private, gold-plated elevator bank reserved exclusively for the top floors. Now, Juliet knew the perilous realities of defying Storm Moretti in public. Surrounded by his enforcers, she had zero leverage. Swallowing her panic, she scooped Leo into her arms, ignoring his protests about his toy car, and walked stiffly toward the elevator. Storm followed, his presence a dark, suffocating storm cloud at her back. The ride to the 71st floor was carried out in agonizing silence. When the polished doors slid open, they stepped into a sprawling, raw concrete penthouse boasting 360-degree views of the Boston skyline. It was empty, devoid of furniture, waiting for Juliet's firm to transform it. Now, it was going to serve as an interrogation room. Storm stripped off his bespoke charcoal suit jacket, tossing it carelessly over a lone sawhorses left behind by the construction crew. He rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt, revealing the intricate, dark ink of the Sicilian Syndicate tattoos wrapping around his forearms. "Matteo," Storm ordered without looking back, "take the boy to the adjacent suite. Get him whatever he wants. Ice cream, television. Keep him safe." "No!" Juliet shouted, clutching Leo tighter to her chest. "Mommy, you're squeezing me," Leo complained, squirming. Storm stepped dangerously close, invading her personal space. The familiar, intoxicating scent of bergamot and expensive cedarwood wrapped around her. "He is my flesh and blood, Juliet. Do you honestly believe I would let any harm come to him?" Matteo would take a bullet to the skull before letting a single hair on that boy's head be touched. Let him go. Defeated by the brutal truth in his eyes, she slowly set Leo down. Matteo, surprisingly gentle, for a man with a rap sheet longer than a novel, offered his massive hand to the boy. "Come on, little boss, let's go find the dessert menu." Once the heavy oak doors clicked shut, leaving them entirely alone in the cavernous penthouse, the illusion of civility violently shattered. 6 years, Storm practically snarled, closing the distance between them until she was backed against a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Commonwealth Avenue. "You looked me in the eyes, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and walked out carrying my heir. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I protected him!" Juliet fired back, the dam of repressed emotion finally breaking. Tears streamed down her flushed cheeks. "You were marrying Camilla Russo. You were merging with the most violent, bloodthirsty crime family on the eastern seaboard. What was I supposed to do, Storm? Tell you I was pregnant so you could lock me in a gilded cage in Long Island? So my son could grow up with a target permanently painted on his back?" Storm slammed his hands against the glass on either side of her head, trapping her. He didn't touch her, but his sheer proximity was intoxicating and terrifying. He is a Moretti. He was born with a target on his back, but under my roof, protected by my men, he would have been untouchable. Instead, you stripped me of my right to be a father. You stole 5 years of his life from me. I gave him a normal life," she sobbed, staring defiantly into his furious eyes. "He doesn't know what a syndicate is. He doesn't know about the blood money, or the extortion, or the men you bury. He is an innocent, happy boy, and I will not let you drag him into your darkness." Storm stared down at her, his anger warring with a profound, agonizing realization. She was right about the danger, but she was dead wrong if she thought he was ever letting them go again. "Normal is a luxury we can no longer afford," Storm said, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with a dark promise. "Because if you think you were hiding from me, Juliet, you were hiding from everyone else too. And now that I know he exists, the clock is ticking before she finds out." "She?" Juliet whispered, the blood draining from her face. "Camilla?" Storm pushed away from the glass, running a frustrated hand through his dark hair. The sheer exhaustion she had witnessed in his office 6 years ago was back, magnified tenfold. "The peace treaty was a failure from the start," Storm admitted, pacing the length of the empty living room. "Camilla is a sociopath, raised by a father who only respects absolute brutality. Our marriage was a farce, a chess match, played with bullets and territory. For the last 3 years, the Russo faction has been quietly trying to dismantle my operations from the inside. They want the Moretti throne, and they want my head." He stopped and looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Camilla knows my only weakness is my lack of an heir. It's the only reason the commission hasn't fully backed her father's play to take me out. If I die without a successor, the families dissolve into a free-for-all war. But if they find out I have a son, they will kill him," Juliet choked out, her hands flying to cover her mouth. The plush, safe world she had painstakingly built in Boston crumbled into dust in a matter of seconds. "They will try," Storm corrected, his gaze turning lethal. "Which is why you are both dead to the world as of this exact second." Within an hour, Juliet's life was entirely erased. Under Storm's rapid-fire orders, Vanguard Holdings legally absorbed her design firm, wrapping her business assets behind layers of untraceable shell corporations. Mateo dispatched a cleanup crew to her townhouse in Beacon Hill to pack only the absolute necessities, making it look like a sudden, permanent, international relocation. Under the cover of darkness, surrounded by an armored motorcade, Storm transported them to a heavily fortified, 60-acre private estate nestled deep in the woods of Weston, Massachusetts. It was a fortress disguised as a breathtaking modern architectural marvel, equipped with bulletproof glass, a subterranean panic room, and an army of guards patrolling the perimeter with suppressed rifles. It was exactly the gilded cage Juliet had sacrificed everything to avoid. For the first 3 days, the tension inside the estate was unbearable. Leo, oblivious to the mortal danger surrounding them, was thrilled by the massive house and the sudden, undivided attention of the towering man he was told was an old friend of his mother's. Storm watched his son with a quiet, intense reverence, absorbing every laugh, every question, every movement. But between Storm and Juliet, the air was thick with unspoken resentment and a dangerous, undeniable, lingering passion. Every time they passed each other in the sprawling marble hallways, the electric friction practically sparked. Late on the 4th night, the fragile peace shattered. Juliet was in the expansive chef's kitchen, pouring a glass of water, unable to sleep. Storm walked in, discarding a secure, encrypted phone onto the granite island. His knuckles were bruised, a dark purple blossom of violence that made Juliet's stomach drop. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "We found a leak," Storm stated bluntly, pouring himself a measure of bourbon. One of the accountants in the Manhattan office was feeding offshore routing numbers to Camilla's brother. "We handled it." "Handled it," Juliet repeated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She crossed her arms defensively. "This is exactly why I left, Storm. I won't have Leo anywhere near this kind of violence." Storm set his glass down sharply, the crystal clinking loudly against the stone counter. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, backing her against the edge of the sink. Do you think I want this for him? Storm demanded, his voice a low, vibrating growl. He reached out, his hand gently but firmly gripping her chin, forcing her to look up into his stormy eyes. I spent 6 years tearing the city apart to maintain control, hoping that one day I could walk away clean. And then I walked into that lobby and saw my soul staring back at me. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a touch so tender it completely betrayed the violence of his world. Juliet's breath hitched. She hated him for taking away her freedom, but her treacherous heart still hammered violently at his proximity. I never stopped looking for you, Storm confessed, the truth bleeding out of him in a raw, vulnerable whisper. The marriage to Camilla was a death sentence I accepted to protect my family. But you were the only thing that ever made me feel human, Juliet, and I will burn the entire Russo syndicate to the ground before I let them touch either of you. Before Juliet could process his confession, the estate's automated security alarms shrieked, a deafening, piercing wail that shattered the silence of the night. The heavy kitchen doors burst open. Mateo rushed in, holding a fully automatic rifle, his face grim. "Boss!" Mateo barked, tossing Storm a customized Glock 19. "The perimeter has been breached. 3 heavily armed tactical teams. It's the Russos," Camilla found out. Gunfire erupted, shattering the pristine, multi-million-dollar glass of the kitchen windows. The deafening roar of automatic weapons echoed through the Weston estate, tearing through the tranquility of the night. "Get to the floor!" Storm roared, tackling Juliet just as a barrage of bullets shredded the granite island where she had been standing seconds before. Shards of expensive stone and shattered crystal rained down around them. Mateo provided cover fire, his Glock barking in the darkness as he retreated toward the kitchen's reinforced steel emergency doors. They breached the main gate, Garda World private security contractors. Camilla didn't just send her own hitmen, she hired top-tier mercenaries. "They have the numbers, boss." Storm didn't hesitate. He pulled Juliet up by her waist, keeping her low. The subterranean vault. Now. They sprinted through the darkened corridors of the sprawling mansion. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the panicked shouts of the Moretti enforcers fighting a losing battle on the front lawns. Juliet's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm of pure terror. Her only thought was her son. They burst into the adjacent suite where Leo was sleeping. The 5-year-old was sitting up in the massive king-sized bed, clutching the covers, his stormy gray eyes wide with alarm but surprisingly devoid of tears. He had his father's terrifying composure. "Mommy? What are the loud noises?" "Fireworks, baby," Juliet lied seamlessly, her maternal instinct completely overriding her panic. She scooped him up, wrapping a thick down comforter around him. "We have to go watch them from the special basement. Come on." Storm hit a hidden panel behind a massive oil painting in the hallway, revealing a biometric scanner. He pressed his thumb against the glass, and a heavy, titanium-reinforced door hissed open. "Get in," he commanded. "The walls are 3 feet of reinforced concrete. It has independent air filtration and a direct hard line to my loyalists in New York. Do not open this door for anyone but me or Mateo." "Storm, you can't go back out there," Juliet pleaded, grabbing his blood-spattered shirt sleeve. The reality of his world, the terrifying, violent reality she had run from, was now threatening to take him away permanently. "Camilla wants you dead. Just stay in here with us." Storm paused, his hand resting on the heavy steel door. He looked at Juliet, then down at the small boy in her arms. The ruthless syndicate boss looked entirely stripped of his armor, revealing the fiercely protective father underneath. "If I stay in here, they will lay siege to this estate until we starve or they breach the vault," Storm said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Camilla thinks she has me cornered. She doesn't realize I've been waiting for her to overplay her hand." He reached out, his thumb brushing a stray tear from Juliet's cheek. "I lost you once, Juliet. I will burn the entire eastern seaboard to ashes before I let anyone take you from me again." The titanium door slammed shut. the heavy locking mechanisms echoing like a final judgment. Above ground, the estate was burning. Storm moved through the shadows of his own home like a phantom. He met Matteo in the grand foyer, surrounded by the bodies of mercenaries. The front doors had been blown off their hinges. Standing in the center of the wreckage, flanked by 8 heavily armed operators, was Camilla Russo. She was dressed in an impeccably tailored crimson trench coat, looking utterly out of place amidst the blood and debris. "It's over, Storm," she announced, her voice echoing in the ruined foyer. "The commission has been notified. You harbored a secret heir, creating a vulnerability the families cannot tolerate. I am taking control of Vanguard Holdings, Moretti Enterprises, and this entire territory." Storm stepped out from behind a marble pillar, his weapon lowered but his posture radiating lethal intent. "You always were incredibly short-sighted, Camilla. Where is the boy?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. "Hand him over, and I might let the mother live." "You don't understand the board you're playing on," Storm replied, casually checking the magazine of his weapon. "Did you really think my accountant leaked those offshore routing numbers to your brother by accident?" Camilla frowned, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfectly manicured features. "I fed you those numbers," Storm revealed, a dark, predatory smile curving his lips. Those accounts weren't holding Moretti syndicate money. They were holding funds funneled directly from the Sinaloa cartel, accounts that Interpol and the DEA have been tracking for a decade. By having your brother access them, you tied the entire Russo family directly to international narco-terrorism. The color drained from Camilla's face. "Look out the windows, Camilla. Those aren't just my reinforcements arriving." The distinctive, deafening roar of armored tactical vehicles approaching shattered the night. But it wasn't the flashing lights of local police. It was the synchronized, blackout approach of federal tactical teams. Storm had orchestrated the ultimate trap. He had weaponized the federal government against his own wife to protect his family. "You're a dead man, Storm," she shrieked, raising her weapon. "Not today," Matteo said, stepping from the shadows and firing a single, precise shot that disarmed her instantly. The raid that followed would make national headlines. The FBI dismantled the Russo syndicate overnight, arresting Camilla and her top lieutenants on federal racketeering and terrorism charges. The Moretti estate in Weston was seized as a crime scene, but in the chaos of the raid, the head of the Moretti family vanished completely. 2 months later, sunlight danced across the pristine sapphire waters of Lake Como, casting a brilliant, warm glow over the secluded stone terrace. Juliette Carmichael, though she was slowly getting used to the idea of adopting a new last name entirely, stood at the balustrade, her hands wrapped around a delicate porcelain espresso cup. A gentle European breeze swept off the water, carrying the sweet, earthy fragrance of lemon groves and blooming jasmine. For the first time in 6 years, her shoulders were entirely relaxed. There was no need to constantly glance over her shoulder, no exhausting instinct to meticulously plan an escape route from every room she entered. Down in the sprawling, manicured courtyard below the terrace, the joyful, uninhibited sound of childish laughter rang out in the morning air. Juliette leaned over the stone railing, a soft, genuine smile gracing her lips. Leo was darting across the lush green grass, his dark hair flopping over his forehead as he expertly kicked a worn leather soccer ball toward makeshift goalposts. He was no longer the unnervingly stoic, quiet child from the Boston hotel lobby. The heavy, invisible weight he had seemingly carried had evaporated in the Italian sun, replaced entirely by the carefree energy of a normal 5-year-old boy. Watching him thrive, completely oblivious to the fact that they were guarded by a highly vetted, invisible perimeter of loyalists, brought tears of profound relief to her eyes. "He's getting faster," a deep, familiar voice murmured from the arched doorway of the villa. Juliette didn't flinch or jump. She turned her head as Storm stepped onto the sunlit terrace. The transformation in the man standing before her still caught her slightly off guard. He was officially dead to the world, presumed lost in the catastrophic, fiery siege of his Massachusetts estate. Vanguard Holdings, and the legitimate branches of the logistics empire had been legally transferred to Matteo, who had taken the reins with strict, ironclad instructions to transition the entire operation completely out of the underworld. Storm Moretti, the ruthless syndicate boss, no longer existed. In his place was simply Storm, a man completely devoted to the woman he loved and the son he had finally claimed. He wore a loose, unbuttoned white linen shirt and light trousers, a stark contrast to the dark, suffocating, bespoke suits that used to serve as his armor. The harsh, violent tension that had once defined every line of his face was completely gone, replaced by a quiet, steady peace. He crossed the warm stone floor and wrapped his strong arms around Gillette from behind, pulling her flush against his broad chest. He rested his chin gently on the top of her head, watching their son chase the ball with a look of pure, unguarded reverence. "He gets his speed from you," Gillette smiled, leaning her weight back into his solid embrace, feeling the steady, reassuring thud of his heart against her spine. "And his stubbornness entirely from you," Storm teased. His voice vibrating with a low, easy chuckle, he pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her temple. They stood in comfortable silence for a long moment, simply absorbing the absolute reality of their survival. Storm shifted slightly, his hand coming up to gently cup her jaw, turning her face toward his. The stormy gray eyes that had once held the coldness of a ruthless empire now held only the warmth of a father and a fiercely loyal partner. "Are you happy here, Gillette?" he asked, the vulnerability in his question striking her straight in the heart. He needed to know that this paradise wasn't just a prettier version of the cage she had fled. She reached up, her fingers lightly tracing the faint, fading scar along his cheekbone. "I have everything I ever wanted, Storm. We finally have a clean slate." Storm pulled her closer, his gaze dropping to her lips before he captured them in a deep, sweeping kiss that held all the unyielding promise of their future. When he finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers, the bright Italian sun warming them both. "No more running," Storm vowed, his voice a fierce, devoted whisper against her skin. "No more secrets. Just us." Did this mafia romance keep you on the edge of your seat? The twists, the betrayal, and the ultimate sacrifice for family make this a story you won't forget. If you loved this intense, real-life drama, hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends who love thrilling romance, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heart-pounding stories every single week.